The day I realized my own daughter had been slowly erasing me from my own life, I was standing in my kitchen holding an empty pill bottle and trying to remember the last time I had eaten a real meal. Not a cracker, not half a can of soup heated up in the microwave because I didn't want to make noise while they were sleeping. A real meal, with a plate and a fork and someone sitting across from me. I couldn't remember. My name is Elaine. Wait, no. My name is Helen. Helen Marsh, 68 years old, retired school teacher, 31 years in the Jefferson County School District, teaching 4th grade. I say that because it matters later. Because people will ask, the way they always ask, how a woman who spent 3 decades teaching 9-year-olds to think critically, to question, to speak up when something is wrong, how that same woman could let things get as bad as they did. I've asked myself the same question every single day since. I suppose the answer is that love makes you stupid in ways that nothing else can. My husband, Robert, passed away 14 months before any of this started. Pancreatic cancer, 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end. We'd been married 41 years, and I don't think I fully understood, in those first months without him, what it meant to be truly alone, not lonely. I had friends, I had my garden, I had my book club on Thursday nights, but alone in the bone-deep way where you reach over in the night and the other side of the bed is cold, and it occurs to you that no one in the world is required to love you anymore. Your children do, of course, or you believe they do. That belief is the thing that got me into trouble. My daughter Stephanie called me 2 months after the funeral. She was crying before I even said hello. She and her husband Drew were in trouble, not a little trouble, real trouble. 6 months behind on their mortgage. Drew's landscaping business had fallen apart over the winter. Stephanie had taken on extra shifts at the dental office where she worked as a hygienist. But it wasn't enough. They had 2 kids. They were going to lose the house. I told her to come home. That is the sentence I have replayed more times than I can count. Just 3 words. Come home, sweetheart. And I meant it with my whole heart when I said it. Robert and I had always been careful with money. We lived modestly, saved steadily, and when he died there was his life insurance, $220,000, sitting in a savings account at First National. There was also the pension from his years working for the County Water Authority and my own teacher's retirement, which between the two came to just over $6,000 a month. We paid off the house years ago. By every reasonable measure, I was comfortable. Stephanie knew this. She wasn't calculating when she called me. I want to be clear about that, because what I've come to understand is that it started as genuine desperation and turned into something else, gradually, so gradually that I didn't notice until it was almost too late. Or maybe I did notice, and I told myself stories about what I was seeing. That's the thing about being a mother. You are the world's most motivated, unreliable narrator when it comes to your own children. They moved in on a Saturday in April. Stephanie, Drew, and the grandkids, Caleb, who was 9, and Mia, who had just turned 6. It felt like life coming back into the house. Robert's chair got sat in again. The kitchen was loud in the mornings. Mia liked to come into my room before breakfast and show me drawings she'd done. For about 3 weeks, I was genuinely happy. Then Drew asked me about the savings account. Not aggressively, not even directly at first. We were at the kitchen table after dinner, and he said, almost offhand, that he'd been looking into starting fresh with the business, new equipment, a proper website, a work truck that didn't need a jump start every cold morning. He said he thought he could turn things around if he just had some operating capital. He said banks weren't interested in lending to someone with his credit history right now. I said I understood. He said he wasn't asking for anything, just thinking out loud. A week later, Stephanie sat down with me and said that she knew it was a lot to ask, but they were drowning, Mom. They were really drowning, and she'd pay me back every cent. She swore it. And could I lend them $40,000 to get Drew's business started again? I said yes. I said yes because she was my daughter and she was drowning, and $40,000 out of $220 felt like something I could absorb. I told myself it was a loan. I wrote the check. Drew's business did not come back. I don't know if he tried. I genuinely don't know. What I know is that 3 months later there was another conversation, another number, another reason. This time it was back taxes. The IRS had come after them for $22,000, and if they didn't pay it, there would be liens. There would be consequences. There would be— Stephanie's voice broke and she couldn't finish the sentence. I paid it. Then the car payment. Then Caleb's braces, which I would have happily paid for without being asked, but the way it was framed was different from a grandmother wanting to do something nice for her grandson. It was presented as an emergency, as one more thing they couldn't cover. And by then I had stopped thinking of myself as someone who could say no. I don't know exactly when that happened. I think it happened so slowly that there was no single moment I could point to. One day, I was a woman with savings and options. And the next, I was a woman who checked her account balance with a kind of low-grade fear that had become my new normal. Somewhere in the middle of all of this, my Thursday book club stopped happening. Stephanie mentioned once that it was a little awkward having people over with the house so crowded, with the kids' schedules, with everything so up in the air. She said it so reasonably. I said, of course, we put it on hold for a bit. My friend Patricia, not Patricia from the name list. I want to be careful here. I mean my actual friend, my colleague of 20 years. The woman who taught 3rd grade across the hall from me for 2 decades. She called several times that fall. I always had a reason I couldn't talk for long. Stephanie was in the room. Or the kids were loud. Or I was tired. Patricia left voicemails and I would listen to them later alone and feel a pull in my chest that I didn't have a name for yet. Later, I would understand it was grief. I was grieving myself while I was still alive. By November, Drew had suggested, always suggested, never demanded, this is important, that it would be simpler if I just added him to my checking account. That way he could handle the household bills, the utilities, the groceries, all of it, and I wouldn't have to deal with the day-to-day headaches. I was 67 years old, and I had managed my own finances since I was 22, including the years Robert and I were building a life together, including the years I raised Stephanie alone through 2 of them while Robert worked nights. But Drew said it with such calm practicality that I found myself nodding. He had my account information by the end of the week. I want to tell you that I had misgivings. I did. There was a voice in me, small, tired, somewhat drowned out, that said this was wrong. That voice sounded a little like Robert. I told it that Drew meant well, that Stephanie needed this, that family helps family. I had told myself this so many times by then that it came automatically, like a reflex. The groceries got worse in December. I don't mean there was less food in the house. There was food, but it was food for 4 people who were not me. Caleb liked a particular cereal. Mia had her specific brand of apple juice. Drew made a lot of pasta. For me, there was whatever was left over, and sometimes there was plenty. And sometimes there wasn't much at all. And I stopped mentioning it because the one time I had said gently that I'd noticed we were low on a few things. Stephanie had looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not anger exactly. Something quieter and more unsettling. Like I was being unreasonable. Like I was a problem to be managed. I started keeping a box of crackers in my bedroom closet. I tell people that now, and they look at me with a particular expression. I understand it. I was a woman with $6,000 a month coming in, living in a house I owned outright, hiding crackers in my closet so I'd have something to eat. The logic of it collapsed the moment I said it out loud to anyone. But logic is a strange thing when you've been slowly, carefully, systematically taught to distrust your own perceptions. When every reasonable-sounding explanation has an answer, and every concern you raise is met with exhaustion or hurt or a reminder of everything they were going through, you stop raising concerns. You start to believe that your needs are the imposition. My blood pressure medication ran out in January. I told Drew we needed to pick up my prescription. He said he'd get to it. A week passed. I reminded Stephanie. She said, Drew had a lot on his plate, Mom. Could I just call the pharmacy myself? I said I didn't have my insurance card. Drew had taken it to deal with some billing issue months ago, and I'd never gotten it back. Stephanie said she'd look for it. She didn't look for it. I went without my medication for 19 days. I know the exact number because I counted. What I haven't told you yet is the savings account. By March of the following year, 11 months after they'd moved in, my balance was $43,000. Down from $220,000. I discovered this not because Drew told me, or because I sat down and did the math. I knew on some level, but I had been afraid to know precisely. I discovered it because I got a paper statement in the mail, which Drew didn't know. I still received because I'd never mentioned it, and I sat on the edge of my bed and read the transaction history for a long time. I sat there for a very long time. I was 68 years old. I had $136,000 of my late husband's life insurance gone in under a year. I had my pension and retirement income, which Drew was still pulling from every month for bills I never saw. I had a box of crackers in my closet and a blood pressure I hadn't been managing for 3 weeks, and a friend who had stopped calling because I had stopped answering. I folded the statement carefully and put it in my winter coat pocket, in the inside pocket where I keep things I need to hold on to. And then I did nothing. For 2 more weeks, I did nothing. I want to be honest about that. Because the next part of this story is the part people find satisfying, the rescue, the confrontation, the moment when everything changes. And I don't want anyone to think I was simply waiting for it. I was afraid. Not of Drew. Not exactly. Though there was something in his manner by then that was cold in a way I couldn't have described to you but felt down to my back teeth. I was afraid of being wrong. I was afraid of blowing up my daughter's life, my grandchildren's stability. I was afraid of being alone again in a different, worse way, with the knowledge that the person I'd sacrificed everything to help had been taking from me deliberately, and that I had let her. The fear of knowing is sometimes worse than not knowing. It was Patricia who came to me in the end, not because I called her, because she drove 40 minutes to my house on a Tuesday morning in March, rang the doorbell, and when Stephanie answered, said she was there to see her old friend Helen, and she wasn't leaving until she did. Stephanie called upstairs that I had a visitor. Her voice was neutral. I heard something underneath it that I couldn't read. I came downstairs in the same cardigan I'd been wearing for 3 days because doing laundry had started to feel like more energy than I had. Patricia took one look at me and her face did something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. She didn't say anything dramatic. She didn't gasp or cry. She just looked at me steadily, the way someone looks at you when they see exactly what is in front of them and they are not going to pretend otherwise. She said, "Helen, when did you last eat a proper meal?" I started to say I was fine. I had said I was fine so many times that it was the first sentence out of my mouth in almost any situation, and then something in me, that small tired voice that had been there all along, just stopped. I didn't say I was fine. I started to cry instead. Patricia sat with me in the living room while Stephanie hovered near the kitchen doorway. After a few minutes, Patricia said, very calmly, that she thought the two of us might go get some lunch. Stephanie said she wasn't sure I was feeling up to it. Patricia looked at her daughter with a teacher's look, the specific look that 28 years of classroom management gives you, and said, "Your mother is an adult woman, and she can decide for herself." We went to lunch. I told Patricia everything in a Denny's on Route 9 over a turkey club sandwich that I ate so fast I had to make myself slow down. She listened without interrupting, which is harder to do than most people realize. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said two things. She said, "This is financial elder abuse, that's what this is called." And she said, "You're going to need an attorney. Today, if possible." I told her I didn't have easy access to my account. She told me that the retirement income was in my name and my name only, and that no one could legally stop me from going to that bank and making changes. She asked me if I had ID. I did. I kept my driver's license in my coat pocket, one of the last things that was still just mine. We went to First National that afternoon. The bank manager, a woman named... I keep wanting to say her name, but she asked me not to include it if I ever told this story, which I respect, sat with me for over an hour. She flagged the account. She removed Drew's access. She helped me set up a new account that no one else knew about, had the direct deposits rerouted, and gave me the number for the county's Adult Protective Services. She also gave me a box of tissues and didn't comment when I used most of them. The attorney Patricia knew, a woman who specialized in elder law, saw me the next morning. She was direct in a way that I found clarifying rather than harsh. She told me that what had happened was actionable, that the transfers, documented and dated, constituted financial exploitation under state law, that I had options, real ones, and that my age and the fact that I'd been in grief when this began did not make me stupid or complicit. It made me a target. She said that last part twice because I think she could see I needed to hear it. I won't tell you the legal process was quick or clean because it wasn't. These things rarely are. But I will tell you what happened the evening I got home from the attorney's office because that is the part of this story that I think about most. I walked in the front door. Drew was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and his phone, comfortable in my house, in the chair where Robert used to sit. Stephanie was upstairs getting the kids ready for bed. Drew glanced up at me with that flat, measuring look he'd developed over the months, the one that said he was calculating whether I was going to be a problem today. I sat down across from him and I put the attorney's card on the table between us. I said, "I've spoken with a lawyer. I've also been to the bank. The accounts have been changed and the deposits have been rerouted. You and Stephanie will need to make other arrangements." Drew looked at the card for a long time. Then he looked at me. Then he did something I hadn't expected. He laughed. Not a real laugh. A short, dismissive sound, like I was a child who'd said something he was too bored to argue with. He said that I was making a big mistake. He said Stephanie was going to be devastated. He said I was an old woman living alone and I should think hard about burning bridges with the people who were looking after me. I let him finish. I thought about Robert. I thought about 31 years of fourth-grade classrooms, of 9-year-olds who tried to run over you the moment you showed uncertainty. I thought about Patricia sitting across from me in that Denny's saying this is financial elder abuse. That is what this is called, naming it so matter-of-factly that the word abuse, which I had flinched from in my own mind for months, suddenly just sat there clearly undramatic and true. I said, "I've thought about it. That's why I'm telling you to leave." There was a scene. There was crying. Stephanie cried, genuinely. And I cried too because I loved her and I still love her. And I still love her, and loving someone and protecting yourself from them can be true at the same time. Drew was cold and then loud and then cold again. The children, thank God, were asleep. Patricia sat in her car in my driveway for 2 hours while it happened because I'd asked her to stay close, and knowing she was there made it possible to stay steady when I felt myself wavering. They left that night with what they could fit in their car. The rest we sorted out over the following weeks through the attorney. What happened legally is still ongoing, and I've been advised not to say more than that. What I can tell you is that the money that remained, the $43,000, has been protected, and that the attorney is optimistic about recovery of some portion of what was taken, though she's careful about promises, and I respect that. My blood pressure is being managed again. I have been back to book club for 4 months. Mia sends me drawings in the mail, which I didn't expect, and which break my heart in the particular bittersweet way that only a grandchild can. Caleb called me on my birthday and talked for 11 minutes, which I know because I watched the timer on my phone the whole time, memorizing it. I am still in my house. It is quieter than it was a year ago, and more often than I would like. I still reach over in the night and find the other side of the bed cold. That part doesn't change. Grief doesn't have a resolution the way stories do. But I want to say something directly to anyone watching this who recognizes any part of what I've described, any part of it, even a small one, the crackers in the closet, the account you're afraid to look at, the friend you stopped calling because it was easier, the voice in you that keeps saying something is wrong, but you've gotten so practiced at talking it down. That voice is right. You are not a burden for having needs. Your home is your home. Your money is your money. Your name on an account means something. Protect it. And when someone in your life makes you feel that needing things is an imposition, that is not love. That is control. Those two things can look identical from the inside until someone sits across from you in a Denny's on Route 9 and asks when you last ate a real meal. I was a woman who taught other people's children how to stand up for themselves for 31 years. It took me almost losing everything to remember that the lesson applied to me too. I think about the box of crackers a lot. Not with shame anymore, I'm past that, but with a kind of quiet wonder at how a person can talk themselves into accepting almost anything if the changes come slowly enough, and the person doing it to you is someone you love. What happened to me didn't happen all at once. That's the part I keep coming back to. Drew didn't walk into my house and take anything. He waited. He was patient. He learned what I was afraid of. Being alone, being a burden, losing my daughter the way I'd already lost Robert. And he used those fears so carefully that I mistook his patience for consideration. I mistook his management of me for helpfulness. Every action had a reasonable explanation, and I accepted every explanation because I wanted to. Because the alternative, that my daughter was letting this happen, maybe helping it happen, was something I couldn't hold and function at the same time. What I understand now is that kindness without honesty isn't really kindness. Stephanie loved me, I believe that, but love that won't tell you the truth. Love that lets you be harmed rather than risk an uncomfortable conversation. Love that watches you hide crackers in a closet and says nothing. That love has failed somewhere. It has failed in its character. And character is the thing that holds when everything else is under pressure. When Drew was calculating and cold, Patricia drove 40 minutes without being asked, because that is what her character had always been. I had just forgotten in my grief and my isolation that people like her still existed and that I was allowed to let them in. I had also forgotten something about myself. I spent 31 years teaching children to think clearly, to ask questions, to recognize when something didn't add up. I had that skill. It was mine, but I stopped applying it to my own life the moment it would have required me to look directly at something painful. That's the thing about clear thinking. It isn't just an intellectual exercise. It takes a particular kind of courage to use it on your own situation, to look at a bank statement you've been afraid to open and let the numbers mean what they mean. When Patricia named what was happening, financial elder abuse, those exact words, something in my mind that had been blurring deliberately came back into focus. Naming a thing correctly is the first act of clear thinking. I should have done it months earlier. The standing up part, the sitting across from Drew at my own kitchen table and telling him it was over, that was the hardest. Not because I was afraid of him, not by then, but because doing it meant admitting the full weight of what had happened, and grief is a strange companion to resolve. I was grieving Robert, and grieving the version of my daughter I thought I knew, and ending a chapter all at the same time. My hands were steady on that table, and my voice was even, and I was falling apart on the inside, and I did it anyway. That is the only version of strength that has ever meant anything to me. Not the kind that feels easy, but the kind you find on the days when you are absolutely sure you don't have any left. Mia still sends me drawings. Caleb called on my birthday. That part of the story isn't clean, and I don't think it ever will be. But I am in my house. I am eating real meals, and the other side of the bed is cold in the night, the same way it has been since Robert died. But that is honest grief, and I would rather have that than the other kind, the kind where you are surrounded by people and still completely alone.